Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you are can, it'd be great if you guys can turn on your cameras, just because it's always nice to see faces rather than names. But if you can't, totally understand. But do appreciate that everybody mutes themselves before we get started here. Just want to make sure everybody can see my screen. It's being shared right now. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. My name is Alvin Huang. I'm the Director of Graduate Architecture at the USC School of Architecture. Um, and I'm trying to figure out. Okay, yeah. Director of the graduate programs at the USC School of Architecture. And thank you for joining us today for our 2024 portfolio workshop. It's a really fun night that we got planned here for you guys today, where we have 8 students in our Masters of Architecture program, 2 of them coming out of the 3-year program, 2 of them, or four of them coming out of the 3-year program, 4 of them coming out of the 2-year program. All of them will show you a combination of their undergraduate portfolios that they applied with, and then also their graduate portfolios of what they look like now. So you get a chance to not only see what they applied with and what their intentions were there, but also kind of the progress and the progression that they've made as students at USC. I think the other thing I want to point out is that obviously the event we're in right now is the one on the left on the screen in terms of the Graduate Architecture Portfolio Workshop. But the other event, which is flashing on the screen right now on the right, is our upcoming Graduate Open House, which is going to be Saturday, November 23rd here at the USC School of Architecture in Los Angeles. So those of you that are in Southern California or feel like making a trip to California, it's a good way to get a chance to get to know the school, see the work of the school, meet our students, meet our faculty, see the facilities, and get a sense of what we're doing here. I also want to make sure that all of you are aware of our USC Grad Architecture Instagram account. It's one of the best ways to follow the work of the school and get to know the culture and see what's going on. It's a really good in-depth view of a lot of the things that are happening here. Really hope you guys follow us there. And also want to make sure you guys are all aware of the various program structures in terms of, those of you that joined us for the virtual information session will remember this, but essentially we are one continuous 3-year program with multiple entry points. So for those of you that have no architectural background or coming from adjacent fields like interior design, industrial design, etc., you'll be coming into the 3-year professional program. For those of you that are coming from a 4-year degree of a BA in architectural studies or a BS in architectural studies, you'd be coming into the +2, depending on the review of your portfolio and your submission materials. And then for those of you that have an existing 5-year Bachelor of Architecture program, you'd be coming into our post-professional programs in the MARS City Design and Housing or the MARS Performative Design and Technology platforms. With that said, I'm going to hand it off to Justin here. Well, actually, I don't know. Justin, do you want to talk about the admission requirements, or should I talk about it? I forgot to tell you about this. So, sorry.
I mean, I can talk a little bit about it. The admission requirements are pretty, on a general level, you would need your transcripts, 3 letters of recommendation, and your portfolio. So if you haven't already started your application, you would just go through the USC website and click through the application, and it's kind of set up in quadrants. And just know that because this is a studio-based program, part of your application is through SlideRoom. So that's where you submit your portfolio. That's where you reach out to your recommenders to request letters of recommendation. And then also we have a new addition this year, which is a 30-second to 1-minute video, essentially to humanize the application process and let us know kind of you as a person, kind of talk about yourself or your personal interest. So that's the gist of it. I'm happy to answer more questions. You can definitely reach out to me at any point and ask about more about the application process or any sort of part of the application. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll leave my email in the chat.
And I just want to add, I think tonight, the format of the presentations today is going to be in what's called a Pincha Kucha format. So it's a slideshow of 20 slides each for each presenter at 20 seconds, auto advance, which in some ways is a really, really good parallel for you guys to think about your portfolio submission, because Slide Room doesn't allow you to upload a complete PDF. It asks you to upload individual slides. And so what you'll be submitting in some ways is equivalent of a slideshow of your work rather than a formal PDF document that has pages, right? So it's actually something very similar to the way the faculty will review the work will be very similar to the way it's going to be presented to you right now. It'll be on their screen and they'll be hitting next, next, next as they go through it. So in a lot of ways, this is a really good reflection of the way it'll be perceived by the faculty or the reviewers. And as Justin mentioned, we are requiring a video supplement. It's not meant to be highly, let's say, produced or something that you spend like a huge amount of effort in terms of the production quality. It's more just to get a sense of your ability to talk about your interests and let you, articulate your thoughts. And so I think that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing from all of you, just a chance for you guys to kind of briefly say why you chose certain projects to be in your portfolio, or what your favorite architect is, or favorite building is, or what your specific interest is in architecture, and gives us a way to kind of talk to you or hear from you in a much more personable way, but also a way that is really just more free-flowing and casual. So I would ask all of you not to read, but really take it as a chance just to talk. And we really want to hear that you have the ability to communicate and articulate your thoughts, but in a way that, again, I want to emphasize is not formal and staged, is actually a more kind of intimate view into who you are. With that said, I guess we'll move on to the presentations, which is why we're all here. So tonight, we're going to be joined, who you see on screen here, our current students, Naila Alejandre. Naila is in the advanced standing program, graduates this spring. She comes to us with a BS in architecture from Texas Tech University. Delaney Ryan in the 3-year program. She'll be graduating this spring as well with a BA, coming from a BA in Communications and International Studies. And so what you'll see is we have every other speaker will be somebody who either came in with previous architectural experience and has a established architectural portfolio, like Jack, the next speaker, who comes with a BS in architectural studies from the University of Utah. Or they'll be like Eliza, who came in with a BS in biological sciences from the University of Vermont and did not have any architectural background. Then Kenny Gueme, a BS in architecture from Texas Tech. Kelly Din, BS in computer science from Bryn Mawr College. Jennifer Dominguez Hernandez, a BA in architecture from the University of New Mexico. And Brian Sinquan Lee, who has a BA in music from Indiana University. And so what you'll get a chance here to see is how all these different backgrounds play out in different ways. As I said before, the presentations will be fully auto advanced. So all of our speakers need to make sure that they keep up, that they are just presenting as they go and jumping on and off. My eyes are on Naila right now, because as soon as I hit next, the 20-second starts per slide. But I also want to remind all of the speakers, there is an extra buffer of 20 seconds because each of you does have an intro page with your headshot on it. Right, so in addition to the slides you gave me, there is a divider page that has your headshot. So that will give you a chance to introduce yourself before we move on to your slides. Okay? Nyla, you ready?
Yes.
All right. I feel like I'm on a game show now. All right. Once I hit next, we're on.
Hi, my name is Nyla, and I kind of curated this presentation in a way that I feel like could spread across all undergrad majors, not necessarily strictly architecture. So I hope you can pull something away from this. So I want to start with creating an engaging personal introduction that sets the tone for the portfolio by establishing a strong visual and personal connection. So I started with a main page that begins to draw viewers to my portfolio and my design style. I also included key information that is effective and efficient, a language that just allows you to understand a portfolio at the beginning. I also created areas where there's subtle reminders of my portfolio, kind of reminding the viewer who and what work they're looking at. And then I ended with creating a statement that introduces myself, my interests, nothing too complicated. With my table of contents, I think it's important to curate and organize your projects. I kept the layout and style consistent throughout the entire portfolio to create uniform look. I created creative project titles, not standard, typical to like housing, whatnot, and then had very clear project information alongside that. I think it's important to have clear, repetitive information and a hierarchy of that information, whether it's through text or font sizes as you move throughout your portfolio, as well as having a consistent main spread. Narratives through language. So I think it's important not just to describe your project through your typical description or prompts, but describe it through language use and visuals. And this can be done in various ways. So like showing diverse perspectives of these visuals, showcasing different atmospheres of these graphics, and then showcasing that through the use of color. And then you can also express your narratives through the use of animation or GIF types to kind of explore variations of the world you created. Another topic I want to talk about is range of skills. I think you can showcase your range of skills through various different means, either through different types of drawings, your skills in model making, as well as your ability to photograph those models. Just like kind of being really playful and creative when you're looking at your own work. And then I personally have professional work, so even showing professional work or other interests inside your portfolio. And then showing renderings, typical renderings, and different versions of renderings beyond your typical like realistic renderings is also kind of important. And I also think that it's really important to show your identity and like making sure that's reflective in your design language. So although I feel like a lot of my projects are pretty diverse, I tried to keep my template and my images formatted in a way that was obvious that it was mine, that my identity really showed through and like provided agency to my portfolio. I think it's important to just be you. So these are a few examples of things I've done at USC. So moving forward to my new portfolio, I want to include more process work. And this comes from either doing site research and showcasing like my understanding of being able to synthesize my research and information that I've gathered across projects, and then compiling it together and showing the most kind of important information in my portfolio. I also want to add more process in terms of precedent research because I think it's important to note the things that I am learning here and what I'm taking away from it and how I'm applying that to my projects moving forward. I want to showcase more diagrams, whether it's like diagramming program and showing my ability to kind of create these different spatial conditions, diagramming geometries that I'm learning new ways of creating here at USC, and then showing different ways of model making that I'm also learning here, either program model making or kind of formal model making, just really showing my ability to like um, approach design in different ways that I've learned here at USC. And I think moving forward, I want to continue to edit at every step. So looking back at my old work and making sure that everything is very cohesive across the entire project, making sure that from drawing stage to production to model making, the projects read across as a whole. Um, Not necessarily where each project in my portfolio is like the same color or the same style, but like the project itself within um, that project is reading as the same thing, kind of creating my own design language in different ways. And then at USC, I had the opportunity to explore interests through different types of electives. I really encourage people to do that. With this project specifically, I got to dive into more of like digital tools and like explore that. So it began with like typical model making tools and then went into researching and understanding different AI tools, which I thought was really interesting. And then it created this entire project where I began to publicate it with the partner I worked on it with, publicating in different ways, whether it was with posters, AR, VR, and even website design. So just like really diving into different interests. I recently joined NOMA's National Organization of Minority Architect Students. This is a club at USC, and we had the opportunity to participate in a design competition. And this has led to a lot of different avenues for me. I was able to network. I was able to create projects that was on a master plan scale, work with different peers of mine, and just kind of develop a project outside of like the typical studio space to add into my portfolio. Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Delaney. I am a +3 student and I come from a background in marketing and advertising. And the way I've structured this presentation is a few tips up front about what I was thinking about when I put together my application for USC, and then a few tips afterwards about how I've been thinking about it, my portfolio ever since then. So first, only include work you can defend. And what I mean by this is, like I mentioned, I have a background in marketing and advertising, but what you won't see in my application portfolio is any marketing and advertising work. I didn't feel like this work was really speaking to who I was and some of my personal design choices. And I found myself only wanting to include it for the sake of speaking to my design experience, but not really any of my personal practice. So I think that work that you're proud of is more important than work that is maybe expressing your past history. So here's some of the work that I've did before, just kind of as an example. But like I can't say if I were to talk about this portfolio that I chose that specific red or anything like that. Like that's not my design decision. And even just the way I'm talking about it now was back then I was thinking I don't really like this. This isn't me. It's not going to make the cut for my portfolio going forward. So yeah, only include work you can defend is the first thought. My second is reevaluate your everyday. I think especially for people like me that didn't have any architecture experience at all before coming into grad school, it's really hard to think about what to include in your portfolio. But after thinking about it I think there are a lot of examples where just everyday things you're doing can definitely apply. Like this was a series in my portfolio where I was making parole, which is literally just a Filipino holiday decoration, but photographed really nicely and like put a little bit of an architectural spin on it, I think can totally work. Highlight composition and technique. Again, going back to work that isn't necessarily architectural at all, there are still ways to include ways to show that you have the skills and the knowledge and the design sensibility without it being explicitly architectural. So I had a lot of paintings in mine as well. And these were works where I felt the composition was nice, the balance was nice, and that just spoke to me as a designer without necessarily being anything related to architecture. So yeah, just kind of like good quality creative work. Fourth, don't feel like you need to kind of check the boxes. Um, One of the things that I added to my portfolio kind of last minute that I regret is some sketches and drawings that I thought were architectural. Um, and really looking back in hindsight now, it's kind of the weakest part of my portfolio because I think you can tell it wasn't really anything that I felt particularly passionate about. It was just stuff that I thought I had to include to show that I could, hang with all of the people that did have experience. So yeah, here's a couple example of those. Um, I think they're fine, but yeah, not anything that's particularly stand out and not anything that I would say is particularly me either. So I would say it's not necessary to try and make your work look architectural if it's not. And then lastly, for this portion, choose quality over variety. Um, so one of the things that I was considering is I had a pretty extensive background in photography, and I was nervous about including too much photography to make it look like that was kind of the only skill I had. But I ended up including a lot of it. I think like half of my portfolio was photography related. So um, I think at the end of the day, your best work is your best work, and it doesn't really matter if it's too loaded in one type of specific creative outlet or not. Okay, now to work that I've done since being in grad school. First, I would say continue to highlight your strengths. So just piggybacking off of the photography idea, that's still a main portion, not a main portion, but a portion of my current portfolio. Still something I do a lot. This was a photo series actually from the study abroad program here. And I won AIA Student Photograph of the Year from one of these. So definitely stick with it if that's one of your interests. It can definitely be applicable to grad school. Um, Two, I would say choose curious work over standard drawings. I think when you get to the point that I'm at in grad school after 3 years of this, it's kind of like everybody can draw a really good section, everyone has plans. Um, but I've found through workshops and interviews and whatnot that that's not really how you stand out. For example, both of these are in my portfolio. I have just a nice section drawing and a photo of a project from first semester. And the photo of this built project is what people want to talk about every single time. So I think that's more important than just showing, yeah, I can draw. And then lastly, I would say coordinate your application package. Um, I think if your resume and your portfolio and your website and whatever other elements you have look like they belong to the same person, not only does that look more professional, but it also is more memorable. So just for reference, here's my resume, the screenshot from my website and the cover of my portfolio, all kind of have the same graphic characteristics and feature some of the same projects too. So it's easier for people visually to remember it when they're, flipping through work. So yeah, that sums it up. The GIF on the left is the application that I came into USC with, and on the right is where it stands now. So quite an evolution in terms of the work, but I think a lot of the graphic sensibility is the same. Yeah, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Jack Summers. Thanks everyone for coming by tonight. The way I kind of formatted this presentation was just to kind of go over a few points of some strategies that I used in developing my portfolio that I applied to USC with, as well as 5 things that I'm wanting to kind of apply in the development of my current portfolio now. And the first tip is just to keep it simple. Embracing blank space and white space is your friend. Less is always more, and it's important to eliminate clutter uh, for the sake of maintaining a strong sense of legibility across the portfolio. And like you see here, my table of contents, it's mainly white space and just a series of ratios and fonts that are organized in a way that reads clearly. And my second tip is to start strong and end strong. And so in my portfolio, which I'll get into in a little bit, has a bit of a mix of undergraduate architectural work and professional work. And so here I started out with my fall semester of my senior year of undergrad studio project. And then the final page of my portfolio was just some branding, photography, graphic design work that I've done on the side for a client. And yeah, and then I'll get into kind of how to represent the work and how I went about that in just a moment. But the next tip is just to showcase a range of work. Um, so, like Alvin had introduced me earlier, I came in with a background of architecture, and I've been fortunate enough to work in design and other related fields. And this right here is a mapping exercise I did in my undergrad. And this page here is just a brand deck that I did for a small startup. So if you have the ability to showcase a range of work or just communicate um, a strong sense of graphic style and understanding through various works, that's pretty important, which segues nicely into my next point, and that consistency is key. In a lot of these portfolios we've seen already, and in mine, the important thing to me was being able to communicate the information and variety of work in a consistent manner. And so I developed a template for myself. And as you can see here, kind of flipped through a few slides and methods and ways I went about organizing the content. And so, embracing white space, but also going full bleed on some pages, and finding ways to kind of mix up the way that graphic content is displayed. And this last set of slides here for my fifth point is to know your narrative as a designer and kind of your design philosophy. So again, I showcased a lot of variety in the work that I applied to USC with, but through a standardized set of graphics, font sizes, font weights, etc., I was able to kind of communicate such different work in a cohesive manner, which spoke to my narrative and personal statement that I applied to USC with. And then these next slides here, I'm going to kind of go over some things that I'm focusing on now in the development of my current portfolio, which is to include more process. I included almost none of that in my undergraduate portfolio. And so you can do that through diagrammatic representations, and drawings and sketches. And these were projects that I've worked on through USC's program. And so, yeah, it's just important to show your design thinking and how you might arrive at particular solutions. And so this is what I'm currently working to include in my portfolio now. And my second point, which actually is kind of tying into my thesis here at USC, is to just become obsessive over your graphics and representation. If I haven't made that clear already, this was from a visual studies class I took here at USC. But yeah, just to kind of find your sense of style and embrace it, whether that be through drawings, diagrams, representations of buildings, and yeah, just to be you, and don't be afraid to, you know, show who you really are through the work. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be, you know, just about the way that you lay out the work, which kind of segues into my next point, being kind of just having a strong sense of compositional intuition and how you demonstrate and showcase the work in the portfolio. I'm trying to be more mindful of this as I develop my portfolio more, and how I lay out like a drawing or maybe close-ups of the drawing next to one another. This was from Housing Studio at USC. It's a showing the entire floor plan versus you know, a more enlarged scale of the unit. In different perspectives. And my next point is to kind of demonstrate your drawing abilities as best as you can. Everyone loves a great drawing, and these were done in Comprehensive Studio and in the next slide, Housing Studio. But if you can demonstrate how you can communicate the design intentions of the project through drawing and representational strategies. I think that'll really put you in an advantage, but kind of like what Delaney was saying, it's not end all be all. And so I think it's just important to kind of capitalize on your strengths. And the most important thing, just to take risks and be yourself in this whole process. The portfolio is incredibly personal. Um, and this was a physical model that I made through Comprehensive Studio at USC. Um, and so, yeah, it's, you know, okay and encouraged to take creative risks. And these were a couple of diagrams I did through the boot camp class at USC as well. So that's about it. Thank you very much. And I guess if you have questions, you can leave them in the chat.
Hi, my name's Eliza. I came in with a bachelor's in biological science, so I had no background. Yeah, and I tried to use like art courses, and then things that I was just doing in my everyday life to fill my portfolio. So this is kind of what that looked like. Mainly consisted of a project that was reflecting my work, my full-time job, and then a drawing project I had done and some photography. I think what was most important was just trying to show that I had some kind of graphic capability. And it was maybe a little bit over designed and in the way that I was trying to show that I could like use a computer and had like a method for displaying everything. And probably it could have benefited a little bit more from having more white space. Yeah, so include personal projects, kind of like what Delaney was saying. I tried to use things that I'd already done, things that I did in my everyday life, and put that into my portfolio. I felt that was most reflective of me, and I wanted it to really represent myself. I tried to curate and organize projects in a way that just reflected who I was and in a way that showcased kind of a range of different work that I did. And so I thought that the most challenging part in creating this portfolio was creating a narrative around the work that I was doing, because I had a lot of art projects, but I wasn't sure that I was able to like show designed thinking or problem solving in any sort of way. And that kind of, I tried to display that through text and through blurbs that I had before each project in my portfolio. Yeah, I tried to take advantage of what I already had and just kind of explain it in a different way. Like I said before, I think that my portfolio is maybe slightly over-designed. Now looking back, some of my favorite pages are the ones that had the most white space, and looking back at it and even putting it in the slideshow, I found that like maybe I could have benefited more from keeping things a little bit more minimal. I tried to have a kind of a range of ways that I displayed things and kind of vary the sizes of images that I was using. And then, so in my everyday life, I was doing research and I tried to display that graphically within my portfolio. to show my thought process, because I was finding that with the art stuff, it was very difficult to have a narrative and explain any type of thinking. And that was kind of what I was most concerned with showing in my architectural portfolio. So I was building my portfolio while I was at work and just trying to use graphics to explain the process of the research that I was doing. Yeah, basically these are some images of cells, which is what I was doing in my research. And then that was the previous slide was the first project that I had. This was the last project that I showed in my portfolio. I think it's important to start and end strong. Start with your favorite project and with your strongest project as well. This is probably graphically like my favorite pages with the layout. Now moving on to some of my work from USC. So this is some of the work I did in my first year, and I think it's still so important to show your process. This project wasn't super architectural, but it was all about process and creating form through different manners. With this, yeah, this is another project that wasn't exactly architectural, but it was super process driven. And I think that having art projects that aren't necessarily architecture, but where you're able to show your thinking is so important. And I've gotten a lot of questions about both of these in interviews and stuff. Having a design language. So trying to stay consistent within projects, I think, is important. That makes displaying it in your portfolio a lot easier. It makes it look more cohesive and more professional as a whole. So I tried to show range within my whole portfolio, but within each project have like a certain level of consistency. Basically consistent either fonts, styles, colors, giving it a more professional look. And also keeping the layout more simple, letting it kind of the work speak for itself. Okay, and then kind of as others have said, highlighting different skills. So I think it's important to curate your projects to highlight different strengths. Like Delaney said, like everyone knows how to draw a section, and sometimes it's those like different skills that make you stand out. Avoid including every project and prioritize quality. In this project, the model was the main focus, so I really highlighted that in my portfolio. If people have to ask how you built something, that's a good thing, like just showing your different skills, whether that be model making or drawing. Yeah, and also choosing your best projects to show range. This one was a full resolution study, and it's something I did in my first year, but it's also something that I get the most questions about and people are the most curious about because it's different from what many people have in their portfolios. Stands out. So this project was render heavy, like I said, showing different skills throughout different projects and just highlighting your range. Curating projects maybe to show your range and show different skill sets that you have. And so also it's important to photograph things well and edit carefully. I think that mistakes and like visual inconsistencies can really distract in a portfolio. So it's important to proofread and like present things in a cohesive and very visual way. Yeah. So this, looking at my portfolio, I think that, like I said, some of the best pages are the ones that have a good balance of graphics and text. And then kind of creating impact throughout a concise language, trying to limit your portfolio to your best projects and maybe focusing on what makes that project unique and what makes that different. Yeah, basically just presentation and how you want people to view your work.
Hey everyone, my name is Kelly. I studied computer science during my undergrad, and I'm a current second year student in the 3-year MArch program here at USC. So in order to prepare in creating my portfolio, I took some summer studio courses and evening classes at a community college because even though I knew that I definitely wanted to study architecture, I was worried about not having enough projects for my portfolio. But in the end, it ended up I had to narrow it down. So my first point that I'd like to make is to curate your portfolio for projects that are stronger than just having every single thing that you've ever done. So from the portfolio that I applied to USC and with my current one, I've narrowed the project list to ones that either align more with the firm or organization that I'm sharing it with. Your portfolio is a chance to show your way of thinking and to tell a story. So I believe like everyone has a unique perspective when it comes to architecture. And so it's really important to show the process of how you got to the final product. So in doing that, you'll have a mixture of diagrams and sketches. And it's also really important how you capture that for your portfolio, whether it's through photography or scanning them. That's one thing that's changed from my portfolio then is now is I've gotten a lot better at editing photos and getting just better in Photoshop. So you also want to organize your content so that there's a clear narrative. We've heard a lot that it's important to have a central theme within your work. And was an insecurity of mine when I was first applying to schools because I felt like I didn't have a clear unifying theme across all of my work. But I think you can make up for that in having a clear design and typography, consistent layouts that can overcompensate for that. And so with each project, I wanted to have a clear title page with the project title, description, a brief if it was done in a studio setting, things that provide context for the reader or the viewer, like why this project exists. So whether it was something that was a self-directed project that you did for fun, or whether it's something that you did in studio, I think it's important to showcase all of that context. And then overall, we've seen that it's important to keep things clean, keep things consistent, use white space when it's available, or you can have some things full bleed. So that's one thing I've tried to maintain over both my old portfolio and my current one. So overall, I think your portfolio is a chance to tell your story. And here is my portfolio that I applied with. As you can see, it's kind of a mix of photos, drawings, hand drawings, drawings made on Illustrator, and also renderings. I think in my case, it worked with my overall essay and application that it showcased that I was willing to learn and interested in a lot of different disciplines, especially coming from a non-architectural background. I think you can use that to your advantage in showing that you're interested in being a multidisciplinary designer. And so with my current portfolio, it is more curated, especially in the context that I'm sharing it, which is typically in a professional setting, or for things like scholarships where it's likely that you'll have to narrow down your portfolio to meet certain requirements. So another tip that I'll share is to have many different types of portfolios and to organize in a way that it can easily be narrowed down if one thing that you're applying for only requires 4 projects versus your full portfolio that can have everything that you've ever worked on that could be displayed on your website or something like that. And so since architecture is a field that thrives on variety and having different perspectives, I still think it's important to have these varying graphic types in your portfolio. So here for the full resolution study and different models, I've had large scale drawings as well as more detailed ones that can help show the variety of work that you've done in school, that can help when getting a job or any other situations for your portfolio. Yeah, so these are different projects that I've done throughout my time at USC, mostly from first and second year. And so now my portfolio is mainly composed of projects from USC and not ones from the other programs that I did before. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer and I did a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture at the University of New Mexico. And I'll just share a few tips of how I curated the portfolio that I applied with here at USC. Starting off with my cover page, I didn't title my portfolio architectural portfolio. I feel like it's more powerful to kind of curate a title that resonates with you and that kind of creates a narrative. So mine is a design journey, and I kind of curated my portfolio in a way that was chronological so that you could see my process throughout my undergraduate years. So a design journey just kind of introduces the person reading my portfolio to the work, and then I chose to do chronological just to show that it's like a process. So like I said, titles hold significance. So every project, I don't title it like the programmatic or like standard title that we would usually title them. I have specific titles that cater to a narrative. And I feel like that just gives the project a story to follow. And it helps like create curiosity. A tip is to stay organized, follow your margins. And I like to start off projects with an overall image of how the project looks and then give some site context. In this example, there's a render on the left on the first page, and then on the right, you see the project with its context and the floor plans. I think having like an overall image at the beginning helps the viewer guide the project, and like it helps the viewer give an overall image of what they're going to be looking at within the project. Same thing here. Kind of keeping the same organization for my projects. I have an overall image of the project, and then on the right, I'd like to show site context and kind of the different design elements that I wanted to incorporate. Showcase physical models. I think it's important to show that you can make something with your hands. On the left, these were concrete blocks that we made by hand by cutting foam board, and then we would pour concrete onto the molds. And the concrete photographed really well. And it's important to show like physical models and also the process of making the physical models. And I think taking nice pictures of the physical models is also important. And these are models I did in my undergrad. And sometimes less is more. I think for my portfolio, I try to make my images like large so that the viewer could see them clearly. Here I chose to do 2 sections of different projects just to showcase. I feel like a section could showcase a project well. And then same thing here, I made the drawings really large on the page so that the viewer, it's easy to read. You don't want someone having trouble like reading your page. So I prefer to use larger images on my portfolio and think outside the box. I also like to do collages. So instead of doing a render in a box, I choose perspectives and decide to render them in a collage format. And I feel like this shows the project in different views and in different ways, just thinking outside of the normal. This also think outside the box, like you don't always have to show drawings. This was a zine, it's a booklet that I made to show site, and we were just working with minerals. So I made zines to show the site context. And diagrams go a long way. I think that if you have a really good diagram, then maybe you should cover an entire page. For my portfolio, I like to include really large diagrams that explain a project pretty well and just make sure the text is legible and big enough. Curate drawings that showcase different skill sets. Here I'm showing like I really like to do graphic drawings with color, so I'm showing that I can work with color and have a nice composition with drawings, especially with like a sketchy render and then a line work. And here showing a floor plan and a perspective in a more sketchy way, and then showing I can also do realistic renders, and then I can also do line work. So showing a variety of different skill sets with your drawings can be helpful. And again, this is just a black and white line weights plan and isometric drawing, just to show that I can do color, but I can also do a normal line weighted floor plan and drawing. And find your niche. I started really liking collaging since my undergraduate years, and I kept that throughout my graduate studies. So I include a lot of collage work, and I do a lot of collage work within my projects. So here are a few examples of collages that I've made. And each one has like a different style, but they're still collaged. And that's just something that I really enjoy to do, and I really like to show projects through collages. So I think if there's something that you really love, you can include it, even though it's not particularly architectural. It could still look good in a portfolio. And photography matters. I've learned that kind of editing your pictures of your models, or it's really important. Here I edited the background of the models and I took it onto Photoshop to edit the lighting. It's important to have clear images. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Brian. Thank you for being here. I did my Bachelor of Music in piano. After graduating from university, I did a gap year and I was always interested in architecture, and so I took something very easy to access, which was interior. So I took one course there. And so first thing I will say is building narrative is very important. This was my cover page, and I included one project for my portfolio. So the whole theme was to bring a desert garden to downtown LA, and it was during the pandemic, so I added some graphic collages. I was into David Carson's work, so that kind of shows in these collages. So building narrative is very important because you're trying to, not just show your project, but also it shows who you are. And also, therefore, sharing process is important. So this is a diagram that I did from program to creating form. So you can see some of the context and the site also, I was looking in downtown LA. So I wanted the reviewers to know that, oh, this guy looked into, site and check from different angles of the view from different locations. So showing these kind of research process is also very important. And I would say keep things clear. So this was my plan, and I show a legend in the bottom, and there's clear path like how one might move along different programs, and keeping things simple so also people can understand. Like literally, I put projectors and transparent LED screens, so you're not there to give presentations, so you need to articulate certain things clearly and visually too. So there's lots of empty white spaces. Uh, Also showing what you know is important. I learned how to do RCP during this program. So you can see there's schedules and legends in different lightings and ceiling conditions. And also here, I wanted to show people that I know basic architectural drawing, like such as exploded Exxon, and also indicating like what things are, and also keeping the same font, keeping the same color of the font, and here, and yeah, I think you should have fun and while keeping the narrative, right? So as you can see in the background, there's downtown LA, and this lady is taking photo of the venue that I designed, and you can see that orange dot line is connected to her. And I had a lot of fun rendering as well to represent how one might move along or the condition might be. Um, yeah, so there's depth of information to it, the surroundings, but also keeping the same color contrast. So from now on, I'll share all the works that I did in the graduate program here at USC. I think building character is very important. So as there were so many photos that I took for this project, but I particularly picked this one and curated it in certain way. Um, And here I'm showing how AI is perceiving the photographs because this research was about AI. And here I'm showing the graph and the organization, but also it follows certain rules, right? Here I want to emphasize you need to create a visual hierarchy. So the center photo is big, and maybe it's not that I'm trying to control someone how they view, but more of the suggestion of how one might move along different images. You can also create visual hierarchy not through like just sizes or where it's located, but also frames. If you're submitting something with GIF or animation, then you can also create by the number of frames. So for example, these morphing forms are longer than the snapshots, right? This one, I'll say whatever it looks right is probably right. So there's no rules. I'm just following the basic edge conditions, like where the bottom paragraph is meeting the bottom of the animation, but then there's huge empty space on the left top side, right? It doesn't make sense, but it looks right to me. And maybe, I mean, I can probably articulate more why I think it works, but it works. Um, Probably because the animation on the right side is very visually attracting or taking attention. So maybe having that much white background in the left top side works. Um, yeah. So it's a research project. So I'm following some sort of research aesthetics of the portfolio. And also I think it's okay to, even if it's not your work necessarily, but you can refer some of the people figures or their works in your portfolio if that backs your research. So left side This is my case. Continuing with this, so I think having diagram is very important because it creates a lot of depth and information. You can you're not, again, you're not there to present, but if someone is reading, then they can just kind of see what that it is. And again, you know, your portfolio doesn't have to be still images and words, but it could be GIF. So this is showing like Python code and the animation that the graphic user interface is creating. And here is the part of that. This is the same project. So this is showing each part, but I would like to emphasize having the rigor of your and showing your process, and archiving is very important in architecture because, for example, like the first part could be other form of architecture itself, right? So archiving is very important. This is the interior views. Again, I'm archiving for maybe next project or projects in the future. This is the same physical model of the same thing that you saw in the GLO. Thank you.
What's up, everyone?
Please. Sorry.
My name is Kenny. I did my undergrad at Texas Tech in architecture and came here for a master's. And I was just kind of showing you guys my quote unquote process and my way of thinking and how I was like creating my portfolio. And it started from my title page. I'm the type of person who tries a lot of things differently. So I wanted to create something that can be tangible and be changed a lot. And my first thought was to kind of create a language visually because I knew my projects were gonna have to change in when it comes to templates and sizing and where things are. So I personally like squares and simple boxes, and I thought that was gonna be a nice way to kind of like split my page in half. That was like my thought process going through, and then each title page would have some kind of color gradient. And at the time, I really love blue, so that's what I stuck with in my undergraduate degree. And as you can see, each like page is just like different sections of squares. So it could be a split, it could be a full bleed, it could be a 4/4 grid. And at that point, I wanted to showcase work that really speaks to that and kind of like emphasize my creativity in that in the way where you have my titles in the front, the left and the right, so you always know what is there, but the images are showcasing different parts of me in the same project. So you have renderings, line work, plans, and each project showed something different. Project where I really emphasized the plans were something that I took care apart, or like my elevations and sections. um, I I have a lot of different graphical styles, and that's something I'm proud of and what I continue to do. So I wanted a way to showcase that in a way that I felt like was reasonable, and also having the ability to do details. This was another part of work that you wouldn't really think of adding, but it's really crucial. And this is probably the most asked part of my diagrams, especially like detailed drawings and when it comes to like interviews for other things and textures and colors. These are projects that I really liked and emphasized when I was creating my portfolio. I wanted to do things that I could talk about and be passionate about because I did have projects that were, let's say, objectively nice looking, but I personally didn't like it. They were just things that I had to get done. And when talking about it, I wouldn't be as enthusiastic or as passionate. And projects like these, where I can put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of details into like elevation drawings or plan drawings in this certain manner, I think it's really useful because as pretty as they are, and as people want to talk to you about it, you need to be able to articulate what you're saying. And again, like as you can see, the theme here is like full bleed plans of different styles, different textures, and then opposite it are always some kinds of sections, some kind of elevations, some kind of renderings that follow it. And but have a change of pace with those is really interesting because you just don't want plan section, plan section, plan section, or some kind of repetition. in my case, I wanted to break that using different quadrants, different diagrams, different forms of media. So kind of like model making. And then going into what my project looks like now, I think it was my original portfolios were a little clustered, and I love visuals, so I just made the executive decision to kind of emphasize them more. So on the top slides are what my portfolio looks like now compared to what it was. And now you have a nice balance of like line work, renders, or like some kind of single monotone drawing with some high contrast of color. And it kind of like takes your eyes into one form of media before you slowly articulate to the other. And I thought that was a good composition for me, especially when you are showcasing projects. And another aspect is as much as you do a lot of work in your undergrad, you come up with so many plans and sections and renderings, and it's quite frankly impossible to put them all in your project. So sometimes you just have to pick a part of your portfolio that sticks out to you, a part of the project that you want to emphasize. And in this case, I really like my renderings in relation to the model making and how it relates to one another. And I think this was something that was strong and like effective. So I chose to just sacrifice some of the plans that I did for the drawings, but emphasize the other parts because I knew in other projects like these, I had plans and I had the rendering capabilities to showcase a different skill set. I think that's really important. You to have different kinds of styles, different organization skills. Um, I I think I said mentioned earlier, like I like doing different things, and I don't want that to be like a limiting factor. Like, oh, I want all my things to be in a certain place, and I was also scared to add things that I did outside of buildings, and coming here gave me a lot of opportunities to go to different classes, learning code, model making, and those things are really important to add into a portfolio. And another one that something that I had a hard time was sticking to a focal point, letting a page kind of have a theme. So like each page for me now, when I make a portfolio, is kind of a poster. Um, it's almost like a catalog that you can just open it to one thing and can read and describe what's happening with your compositions. And again, I still have the same two square grid process in which you can tell there's two sides, but I break it a lot. And I break it in areas that I feel and deserve to be broken and which are emphasized. And another thing that I never had were sketches or more diagrams that I just personally thought were ugly. And looking back at it, I'm like, I've kind of like fell in love with them again because I don't know why I never added them in the first place. And because they're really nice to understand details and your process work. And this is another project from NOMAS. I'm also part of NOMAS, and this was a project that I did in my first year. And this was something that I never kind of like did in my undergrad because I was just too scared to join clubs and associations that did this kind of work. And it actually benefits in ways of meeting new people and having a diverse portfolio in which you can do other things other than your studio work. And lastly, I think it's really important to, for me anyways, is like I have fun with what I do. Like if I'm not having fun with what I'm doing, then it kind of takes the joy out of it and it makes me not want to do it anymore. So when I do my portfolio, it's kind of like a free time to engage and uh especially like relate to me as a person. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kenny. I have to say for everybody on the screen here, I think it's a little cute that Kenny said he was scared of joining clubs when he was an undergrad because now he's the NOMAS president. So he went from being scared to join them to now running them. But anyways, I think now what we'd like to do is just open it up for questions, for any of you to ask questions of the students and see if there's anything that you advice you like specific questions you have about their portfolios or specific advice you have on applying or their experiences or take the opportunity here to not ask me or Justin questions that you can reach us by email all the time, but things that would be directed at somebody who was a couple years ago in the same position you are, applying for school, thinking about school, but now has been here, thought about it, and is succeeding in school.
Hello. Hello. Question about the personal statement. You said there's like no limit, so I'm afraid I'm either writing too much or I don't really know. Well, I guess like a little bit more guidance in that.
I
I
would
can.
say that, okay, go for it, Nyla.
Um, I wouldn't like look at your personal statement as like something where you feel like you have to mention everything necessarily. I would look at it as more of like talking about something that interests you, even if you get a little bit more specific with it. Um, yeah, I just wouldn't overthinking it in a way where it's like I want to express that I can do this, or I'm this type of person, or I like architecture because A, B, C. I think sometimes even talking about other things outside of architecture may benefit you in helping the reviewer kind of remember you in a different way and more unique way than the typical way of explaining your interest in specifically architecture.
Kind of building on top of that, I think the personal statement is a great place to articulate your design philosophy and narrative that you showcase in your portfolio and to kind of um, create a harmony between the two. That's kind of the approach that I took when I applied to USC.
One thing I want to add on the personal statement, even though I said I wasn't going to talk, I'm going to do it anyways, because that's what I always do. Um, I think one of the things that you want to remember is that you are going to be one of 300 to 400 people applying. And what are you going to say about yourself that doesn't cover the same ground that everybody else is going to say? Meaning, if you say you want to come to architecture school because you want to become an architect and you love architecture and you've liked architecture for a long time and it's your dream and it's your passion, that's probably 90% of the people that are applying can say that same thing, right? So what is it that you can distinguish about yourself that makes you unique out of that, you know, 300 to 400 people that are applying? And in terms of length, the other thing I would say is it's similar to the portfolio issue is if you start strong, people will keep reading. If you start slow, people will lose interest. Because going back to everything I just said previously about the 300 to 400, it is broken up and there's multiple reviewers. I am the one person that reviews all of them. So if I'm reviewing 300 to 400 applications, I get bored really quickly. Right. And so like if you don't catch my attention right away, I will move on. And so length is important because you want to have enough substance, but length can be a problem if it's boring. Right. So if you think that somebody's not going to keep, if there's a lot to go on and on and on and on, same with the portfolio. If the portfolio is extended and repeats a lot of redundancy, then you lose interest. Any other questions?
There's a question in the chat. I could read it out loud. Someone said, I've had trouble keeping my designs looking consistent. Do you have any advice for keeping designs looking consistent despite using different styles and techniques? I would say that like not every project has to look like the previous. I know I've seen a few portfolios where like say someone has like the color blue across the entire portfolio. I think that maybe breaking up the use of color is really good in terms of differentiating each product. But in terms of keeping things consistent, I would focus on like the way that you're cropping your drawings or laying things out. If they're that diverse, maybe just the way you set up your template alone can help create a unifying language through your portfolio.
I think
That's
I
actually,
can
go ahead, Kenny.
I think I can add on that because none of my projects on my portfolio are consistent or in the same graphic style. And the key to that is previously to what Nyla said, cropping makes it 10 times more important because you need to be able to allow the person to know that you're still the same person who did it. So you need to have the same intangibles in that manner, but color, if color is the reason why it doesn't look the same, then there's a lot more wrong in the layout, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that that was actually kind of my biggest struggle in developing the portfolio when I was an undergrad is how do I take all of my projects with completely different color palettes and drawing and modes of representation, and how do I bridge it all together? And the answer is, you do that through your template and the way that you lay out all your content, or at least that's how I did it. And so finding ways to crop your drawings, and maybe going full bleed and the way that you photograph your models.
There's another question in chat then. Is there a specific number of projects that are good to include? I think this can kind of vary depending on the page limit of the application, but I do think it's good to have some variation just for the sake of maintaining interest, to Alvin's point. Because if you have 3 projects that are all really in depth, it can kind of start to drag. But if you have 1 or 2 that is broken up with some smaller projects, then that can keep things a little bit more interesting. I would also add to that point um, that not every project has to have all of the drawings. You don't need a plan and a section and a site model, et cetera, for each one. So you can definitely curate down that way. And in doing so, have more space to include different kinds of projects.
And I will say the limit of what you can submit is actually dictated by slide limit. Right, so the number of there's no limits to the number of projects. There's a limit to the number of slides that you can actually include. I don't remember what that number is, but you're bound by that. So, but again, I think the most important thing there is the curation. And I think the curation means that you're able to choose what's important to include, what's not important to include, and also what's important to include in adjacency to other, like in their sequence, like how do they build on that narrative. I'm gonna go to the people who have their hands up here. I'm gonna start with Janae.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I missed it in any examples, but how can we handle including collaborative projects in the portfolio? And how can we clearly explain our role in the project?
So,
That was oh, go ahead, Nyla.
so for my portfolio, I have a mix of like projects I did in professional like world at an office, and then some I did in studio with partners. I think it's really important to add everybody's name. If there's too many, maybe kind of dial it down in a way that's more of like, you have the team name, and then you have, say, renderings created by, and then your name. And showcase the things that you feel like you work the most on, because like that'll help with the whole editing process as well. But like emphasize what you specifically did for that project, whether it's like a small note in the bottom. I don't think it has to be like an entire sentence of everything that you contributed to the project, but just like a small note in terms of like what you contributed to that specific graphic. I feel like is a really easy way of like just making note that there's other people involved.
I also had a fair share of professional work in my portfolio, and collaborative projects that I did in undergrad. And I can't remember actually if I made it a part of my template or if I included a little blurb, but I always made sure to include a little thing of text that said produced in collaboration with, or designed with so and so, or showing what it is exactly that I did, and I made it very clear.
Oh yeah, so I think one thing I would say about the group work is to be explicit about your role, and a tendency that, I personally in my graduate portfolio and in my professional portfolios when I was applying for jobs when I was younger, was I made it a point to actually include a note in my portfolio that said everything that was produced in the portfolio was produced by me, unless otherwise noted. And so if there was a drawing that was collaborative, then it would have a note produced with blah, 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 blah. But if there was no note, then you're telling people from the beginning, everything is by you. But I think it's also important to talk about the collaboration, because I think one thing we do recognize is that the reality is design is a team sport. And your ability to work as a part of a team is super important. And I think that's something that you'll see in grad school as well, is that there are team-based projects. And sometimes, you're going to be working on something where your idea wasn't the selected idea, but you're still part of the team and a significant contributor to making it happen. Next question, I'm going to go with Phoebe.
Hi, sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm still at work. But I wanted to ask, for the people that were considering multiple programs, what made you guys choose USC? And are you guys involved in any of the extracurricular clubs regarding architecture? I know one guy was talking about it, if you wanted to talk more about what you've done in it, or what opportunities you've learned from it, or anyone else.
I can speak on that a little bit. I'm currently involved in NOMAS, which is National Organization of Minority Architect Students. Kenny is currently the president of NOMAS. This year I was the design competition coordinator. And I feel like that's a really good way of just getting to meet different people within the field, because we do firm tours. We do, obviously competitions and then different types of conferences. I feel like what stood out to me in terms of picking USC was honestly just Alvin. I felt like he was really good at communicating and just always reached out to me when I kind of emailed him. He's just extremely connected, and I know that USC always says we have a really big network. And being here for about 2 years now, I can tell that there is a really big network. Almost all of the clubs are involved of keeping that network within the clubs themselves. So although USC has their network, and then the College of Architecture has their own network, even NOMAS has their own network across nationally. So I feel like the network in combination with just Alvin's attentiveness is what made me feel like I was going to be listened to, and it made me feel a little bit more encouraged to accept going to USC over some other institutions.
Thank you.
I can add to that too. Another organization that I'm a member of is Space, which is a publication. We're just getting off the ground. We're publishing our first volume this spring. It's a giant 500-page book. And so that is another way that people are thinking about architecture outside of actually producing architectural work, is through writing and through essays and through interviews, and all kinds of content curation in that regard. And I think your question kind of gets to the point of why I picked USC also, is that I came from a big school and I wanted to continue to go to a big school where there was a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of different things going on within the School of Architecture and outside of it, and opportunities to take classes at all of these different programs, and opportunities to meet people from these different programs, that I think just kind of broadens your horizons outside of specifically architecture.
So there's a lot of opportunities to do different, I guess not majors, but different fields. Like you said, there's more editorial, or I guess not architecture related. There's a lot of opportunities to join different clubs that aren't just related to your master's.
Yeah, definitely. The architecture building is shared by the art school, and then right behind us is IYA. I don't even know what their program is called, something digital technology related. So there's a good amount of cross-pollination between programs like that. And then also people take classes at some of the other programs. Like there's a lot of crossover between the business school because of real estate development. So yeah, both in extracurriculars and academically, I think there's a lot of that happening.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
I'm gonna throw Brian and Jack on the spot here because I know both of them were considering other schools as well. Why did you guys choose USC?
Can you hear me? So I was debating between three schools, and out of those three, I thought USC has most balanced in terms of balanced curriculum and design languages. And also faculties are from everywhere and doing different things. And also one of the things that really I value is the equity and justice that USC is pushing in the narrative with design excellence. So all these like balance, I think, really attracted me.
For me, I chose USC. I think the number one thing that I saw, I was also touring and got to see a lot of the thesis students that were presenting that year when I committed, is that there's no consistent style, which I thought was really interesting. A lot of schools are known to have a specific brand or style. And also, well, and then USC encourages you to just be yourself and pursue that, which I loved. Secondly, I would just say that we have a pretty strong studio culture here. USC is a very social school, and that really stood out to me and was important. I spend most of my time in studio, so I wanted to be somewhere where I would thrive and make good friends.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Vanessa.
Do any of you have any advice when choosing professional work to include in the portfolio? And if those kind of more specific technical skills would even be considered helpful for an application like this?
I would say yes. The way that I personally did it was kind of thinking at it through a different lens than you typically would, like a construction set. I'm currently working on updating my new portfolio and I have a lot of like more technical drawings, but I think looking at it through a lens of like, creating a good crop and not necessarily looking at it as like, hey, this is your typical set you send in for permit or whatever, picking the drawings you feel like showcase your kind of either whether it's drafting or whatever skills in a different way outside of professionalism and more creative way.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to jump in on that question? Not, I will add to it. So I think the professional experience is important to include if you have it. It's not necessary if you don't. If you do have it, I would also say that we're less interested in your, let's say, full display of technical ability, and more interested in your ability to have demonstrations of craft and creative intelligence. And so, I think in the professional world, a lot of times the work that you do will end up being more on the production side of things. And what we're more interested in is your ability to solve things. And so from the production side of things, I would say it's useful to show, but not useful to dominate, right? Meaning you're showing your breadth and your balance of abilities. But if there's too much of it, that's I would say that's not the reason we're admitting you, is because of that.
I kind of forgot the question, which is why I refrained from answering right away. But I think including professional work in your portfolio presents a great opportunity for you to reinterpret what you've done in the office as well. For me, I included a set of details that I drew for an apartment building, but I didn't just, slap the details on. I made like an axon and added graphics and color. So it's kind of presents, an opportunity to show, not only what you've done in an office, but your ability to think creatively and independently, and how you can maybe approach a different, uh, I guess, principles, set of representational ideas of what you're working on.
Thank you.
Lily.
Sorry, was that Lily?
Yes, it was.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I have a question for the current students. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your portfolios. That was really, really helpful. Yeah, I was just wondering if any of you guys are doing the IPAL program for licensure, and if you are, like, how are you finding it? Is it manageable to obviously like do everything, and yeah, if you can talk about that.
Okay, I guess nobody on the screen is in the iPal program. Yes, no, nobody?
I'm in it, but I just started this year, so I don't think I can talk to it that much, honestly.
I can speak about this a little bit, Lily, and I think this will be fairly consistent in terms of the student participation in IPAL. I think IPAL is one of the benefits that school has because our curriculum has been approved by NCARB, the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, to be pre-approved so that our students are able to begin testing as soon as they become USC students, meaning they don't have to wait till they graduate to begin testing. But that doesn't mean they're ready to test in the eyes of the students, or that they're ready to do it as a break from their studies. So there have been students that have been able to come in, do IPAL, and start testing right away. But that does require quite a lot of personal, I would call it, discipline, in terms of being able to balance studying for the tests, preparing for the tests, while you're doing your graduate studies. The people who take best advantage of it tend to use their summers to do it rather than during the school term. And the only people that have been successful in getting fully licensed by the time they graduate are people that have come in with significant work experience and have actually started the process before they arrived at USC. So I would say it's a big benefit, but it's also one that is, maybe the easiest parallel would be saying it's like a gym membership that we give you for free, but you still have to take the time to go to the gym and show up and, put in the effort.
Okay, that's helpful. But just in terms of like earning the hours, so would the hours only be earned through kind of external work experience during the holidays?
The hours are able to be obtained through external work experience over the holidays, during your summer breaks. Some people work part-time while they're in school, but they can also be obtained by doing things like working for faculty for their faculty research, or by, let's say, for instance, some of the students that participate in the NOMAS competition have a faculty advisor, and then if their advisor is a licensed architect, then they can get those hours signed off.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Jenny.
Hi. So this question is more for like those without an architecture background. I was wondering, like, where did you find inspiration for your portfolio, and how did you translate that into your design philosophy or like your style without it getting lost in someone else's design, if that makes sense?
I can start. For me, I found inspiration through looking at current students' portfolios, whatever I could find online through events like these, or like on forums, on Instagram, like my Explore page is like all architecture stuff right now. So once you find some inspiration, I think it's important to reflect and like think about why you're drawn to that person's layout. I think with a lot of us, we go for the more simpler, like less is more, larger white space layouts. So it really isn't a matter of like not being able to showcase your own design expertise, or more like how can you then adapt or make all of your content adapt to a unified layout. So you can pick and choose certain aspects of different portfolios that you like, but then I think the key thing is just to make sure that it flows.
I think Elisa's portfolio did really good in terms of communicating what she's been researching after graduating from undergrad. I think that could be one of the reference. I mean, the content is, I think, more important. What like your thought showing, being able to show your process or thinking process, but with visual clarity. So I would also not just like look at images or like other people's portfolio and just like copy and paste that format particularly, but create something that can communicate your background or who you are. I think that's one way to do it too.
Yeah, I looked at websites like Issue and Archinect, and there are kind of forums there, ways of searching portfolios with no background. Specifically, I feel like no matter how I displayed it, it was gonna be original to me just because of the work that was in it, and it wasn't architectural at all. So it was more so like figuring out how to lay out my work in a way that made it seem more architectural, or in a way that showed process in a way that maybe architects do. So I did look at a lot of like architecture portfolios from students with backgrounds and tried to apply some of their like thought process or layout formats in my own work.
That was really
Any more
helpful.
questions?
Thank you.
Any other questions here for the students? Make sure you ask them what you got them here. Okay, so I'm going to answer a question that somebody asked me directly in the chat, and I felt like it was too big of a question to answer directly in the chat because I didn't want to like write a paragraph or two or three. And also I felt like it's a good question for everybody else to hear. So they basically asked me, how is going to USC going to be better than going to a different university, which is a very, very broad and big question. And I can't speak for other universities, and I don't think any of our students can, but I think what we can speak for is USC. So maybe if I can ask the students, what do you feel like is the benefit of going to USC?
I can start. Something that I don't think was mentioned yet is the huge network that USC has. Especially for me, I went to a small liberal arts undergrad, where the network didn't reach as far outside of the Northeast US. So going to a school with such a large name recognition, as USC, has helped a lot in just everyday, but also professional aspects. And especially the School of Architecture has so many events and programs with like mentorship placement with a working professional, and other events. So I feel like coming to the West Coast, where I didn't have as much of a undergrad college network, I felt supported with USC, knowing that I'll have a network and I'll be able to, it won't be as hard to get a job after graduation.
I think what stood out to me was the amount of faculty and professors that are actually practitioners and work in the field while also, uh, teaching. I think that was super valuable to me, knowing that, um, there's just such a heavy emphasis on practice. And, USC pushes out really successful architects. And that's really something that stood out to me, and knowing the network that we're being um, a part of in Los Angeles and throughout the country, and everywhere. The USC network really has a name for itself.
I think another thing is just its site in Los Angeles. I think LA as a design city is so dynamic and complex and poses a lot of interesting problems. But it's also just so different and really contemporary in a way that a lot of other cities aren't. So I think being immersed in the design culture here is a big perk of USC for sure.
Something that I like
Well,
is the class size. Yeah, I think that like coming in as a +3, it's like a more intimate group that first year and you really get to know everyone. And then it's nice having kind of the added +2s, and they were a bigger group. So it's nice to see like a diversity of work with like a pretty large background, variety in background. And yeah, it's not so big that you don't know everyone. You know everyone, but there's also like a big variety.
Mine is kind of personal, but I just follow my gut. And I physically visited all 3 schools that applied. Um, and at the end, I think that's also, I think following your intuition is very important.
Um,
I just wanted to like add one more thing.
okay.
I think so like what Elisa was talking about in terms of like the diversity of like being integrated with kind of people from different backgrounds has been really interesting. And I feel like I'm learning a lot from people that I probably would have never met had I not come to USC. And then on top of Kelly's note about the networking, I think it could be really hard sometimes, especially when the job, I guess, field is like saturated, where we have these kind of like career fairs and events where we get to network with people, and we have mentorship programs where we get to meet people within the field themselves. I think it's really important to have that kind of net to fall back onto if you yourself can't find work outside of or when you graduate. So yeah, I think the combination of just being immersed with diverse faculty and students, as well as having these tools to help you outside of school, is a really like important factor when deciding where you decide to go to graduate school.
All right, so there's a question in the chat that says, what are some of your favorite classes or professors that you've taken while you're at USC?
I was in the middle of typing a response, so I'll just go ahead and say it. But any of probably my favorite professor I've had of all time is Brian DeLuna. I would take any of his studios or visual studies classes if you get the opportunity. I definitely grew the most and was challenged in ways I never thought I would be challenged. And the way he talks about architecture, and the way he just taught all of us students and really immersed us in, designing and process is invaluable to me. And I wouldn't be where I am today, having not been in any of his classes. So I would highly recommend him.
I guess I would say I most of the classes I take here in USC are more hands-on stuff. Don't like taking tests. And my favorite professor right now is probably Michael Scott in a like techniques of digital fabrication class where we get to right now we're playing with like robots and robotic arms, and honestly it's probably one of the coolest things I'm doing right now, and something that I've always thought of but never imagined myself being able to understand how it works, but he has made the process so much fun and enjoyable. So it's like I actually look forward to going to class, and it's like it sucks I only have it 1 day a week, but it's like damn, like my Thursdays are my fun days. Um, and similar, there's another fabrication class I took last year with Robert Lay. Oh, Jack just wrote that down. Yeah. Um, really amazing class. I got to work in a group settings in creating pretty much we created a lamp, and it was something outside of architecture, and it makes you really emphasize your design skills which you use in other aspects of your life, and it was really cool, and love those two professors.
Last
think
year, oh,
go ahead,
you
Kelly.
go. Oh, okay. I was going to talk about we have the opportunity to do global studies courses. So this last semester, I went on the Japan trip, which was like a 2 week course. I think some other students have gone on it in the past too, where we got to travel to multiple cities throughout Japan, and see architecture, historic architecture as well as contemporary works, and like visit firms. And from not having a study abroad type of experience previously, I really loved that USC had these opportunities for like travel as part of our studies.
My favorite semester was first semester actually, with Jimenez Lai and Ryan Tyler Martinez. It was pretty intense with not having much background in architecture. I mean, I did take courses, but it was not definitely not enough. Um, and just building a good relationship with your cohort and building memories, I think. You learn so much in that foundation uh, studio.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I was going to have the same answer as Brian, because I think coming into a program like this is really, really intimidating with no background. Like I remember the first time I met Alvin when I was touring the school. He was talking about like, yeah, Frank Gehry came here, but we're trying to look at more current alumni. The whole time I'm thinking, I don't even know who Frank Gehry is. Like I knew nothing. But in 505A, you truly make so much progress. And I think in a lot of ways, by the time that you finish your first year and get joined by the +2 class, I at least personally felt like I could hang pretty well. So I don't want like the rigor of this kind of program to intimidate anybody from coming into it, because that was still, yeah, my first semester so far.
Would you guys recommend taking time off after undergrad before pursuing a master's? Is it better to work in the field for a while before applying?
All right, let me say some. At the end of the day, you have to know yourself, because I know I like my type of person, and I thought about taking a year off, and I had the mentality of would I be able to get back into the mindset of school and working in that aspect. And I would recommend it if you're someone who is really focused on like a direct pattern. And because when you get into the work-life balance, you kind of get yourself in the right system, and it'd be hard to like break that if you're a type of person who likes that kind of rhythm. Um,
I would say architecture school, if for those who's coming from different background, it requires a lot of dedication, and so I would say think before, you know, applying, and prepare that you're gonna learn a lot, but also you're gonna also work hard. Um, so I think it's up to you. I wasn't trying to scare anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact of the matter with applying to graduate school, I think whether you're straight out of school or not, it's really a personal decision, and I wouldn't base that decision off of somebody else's decision. You have to make it yourself for yourself. And I think for some people, it takes the year working for them to decide they want to continue to go to graduate school. And for others, it's actually, you know, I would say the direct path of being a student and continuing as a student. There's more, let's say, continued inertia in doing that. And for others, it's the burnout, meaning they finish undergrad and they need some space before pursuing another degree. So it's really an individual decision. Another question here is for those who did the 2-year program, is there anything you feel like you missed out on by not doing the 3-year program? Which is actually a really good question. I'm very curious about this one.
For me personally, like I come from an architecture background. So I wouldn't say there's like necessarily something I feel like I missed out on. What I did notice though was that a lot of the MR3s were like extremely skilled in terms of like model making, graphic works. They thought about things in a different perspective, and I feel like developed a ton of skills in that first year of the MR3 program that they were able to not only keep up, but like exist past a lot of us here because they were here for a year prior to us being here for a year. So I noticed that I had to ask a lot. Like I asked Brian a ton of questions in terms of model making because he was familiar with being here for an entire year and all the tools that were available here. So I felt like that was a really kind of good opportunity on my end to kind of fall back onto them in terms of them just having that knowledge that like new people coming in from different universities didn't have.
I think Nyla has a lot of really great points, but also, graduate school, like architecture school specifically, it's supposed to be fun. And, I would have loved to have participated in the full resolution study. And that was something I didn't know going into USC. And I think, like Nyla was saying, you acquire so many skills in that extra year. And oftentimes a lot of the MArch3s, are better than the incoming MArch2s just because they have the advantage of, being at USC for an extra year.
It's a common question that I get oftentimes in terms of like, how is it possible that somebody can, replace an entire 4 years of undergrad education with 1 year of graduate school? And I think one of the things that all of you would need to think about for yourselves is what you could accomplish in 4 years fresh out of high school, where you randomly chose a major and kind of said, I'm going to study that. And then you did that while going to undergrad, having a university experience, balancing your general electives and, kind of undergraduate life versus making an adult decision that you thought about a lot and decided to go into and enter graduate school with a kind of very focused attitude as an adult, and having no general elective requirements. And I think one of the things that's very clear is that when you're in your undergraduate study, you're admitted to the university, and then you choose a major, and you have the ability to change majors. Where in graduate school, you're admitted to the school and to the program, And so if you actually want to change, you actually have to be admitted into a different program. And your admission was only for that program, which means all of your tuition dollars and all of your curriculum is exclusively or primarily exclusively in that school. Not exclusively, but there are chances to take electives outside, but they're chances as opposed to an undergrad where it's a much more diverse set of things. And so some students will come in and have done that undergraduate 4-year study, and let's say the diversity of their experiences means that they have not had that concentrated experience in the studio environment, and they benefit more from being in a 3-year program because they just haven't had the number of reps in the studio environment, even though they have a 4-year BA or BS in architecture. And others have progressed enough in those 4 years that they really deserve to be in an advanced standing. And so I think that's something for you to decide for yourself, whether or not you think that that additional year is actually something that would benefit you. And of course, there's the cost consideration. It is an extra year of tuition. Janae.
Yeah, so this is just like a general question out there geared more towards the experience at USC. What do you guys wish you had known about balancing life and school before starting the program?
I think personally, since I came from an architecture background, I knew for sure like in my undergrad, I had a lot of all-nighters. And I felt like I was dying slowly for 4 years. And I made it a point to like really dial it back and like understand my own needs and health. And then also being in LA, like I want to explore, I want to check out new places, I want to do this and that. And like, even though USC is very rigorous, I feel like I still have a lot of time to do the things I want to do. I'm not necessarily, I'll pull an all-nighter like once or twice a semester, but I don't do it the way I used to do it in undergrad. And I think that mainly has to do with being more mature and like organizing my time better, but also like professors here, I feel like are very kind, at least the studio professors I've had. They're very understanding and they're not going to be the type of professors who want to beat you down until you literally have to produce. They understand that we have other classes and we're students and there's only so much we can do. So I've been really grateful to have professors who kind of see that and are not so strict on having so much work where I feel like I'm not getting any sleep.
This doesn't really answer your question, Janae, but I want to build off of Nyla's response there and say that one of the big focuses of the program since 2020 coming out of the pandemic and a lot of the kind of cultural shift that's occurred in contemporary society related towards mental health and wellness. One of the big emphases in the program has been emphasis on quality over quantity. So dialing back the amount of deliverables being asked by faculty, but increasing the number of iterations to increase the quality of the deliverables being produced. And so we're less focused on producing more and more focused on producing better. Anybody else have an answer for Janae in terms of something you wish you knew before coming into USC? Apparently everybody knew everything they needed to know. So we've hit past the 7 o'clock mark here, or 7 o'clock Pacific time, which means it's much later for some of you. So I think we'll end on that last question there. Thank you everybody for attending. Thanks for all your questions and your engagement and your participation. But primarily, thank you for the students. You guys were great. Really, I have to say, I enjoyed the presentations as well. It was really nice to see the work and the progression, and particularly for me as somebody who was able to, see their applications, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and seeing where they're at now. It's, you know, been a big jump in their maturity as designers and their evolution as thinkers. So really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.